You are experiencing the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast.
Welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty, where we're bringing you the people and the organizations fighting for liberty around the country and in your region, and also some of the stories from a liberty perspective that are going on out in the world. Today, we are consumed by what is happening in Venezuela. We've been talking about it on the show sporadically over the last few months with all the issues with bombing drug boats and ties to socialists in this country who want to emulate what we see in Venezuela. So we're going to talk a lot about what just happened and maybe some of the takeaways that we can see from a liberty perspective. But before we get into any of that, let me introduce you to our panel today. And we have Leon, the word Brathwaite, last word in liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. My name is Jason McPhee, and I'll be your host. Well, we always like to start off with a quote of the day. And this one, on the face of it, doesn't seem like a liberty quote, but in some ways I kind of think it is. And so let me share the quote here. It is actually a quote from Sun Tzu, who was a Japanese general around 500 BC. And he's a little bit of a philosopher, and he wrote a book called The Art of War. Also, you wouldn't necessarily expect libertarians to be talking about the art of war. That's a positive thing. But in the case of Sun Tzu, I think maybe one of his most important lessons is one that, maybe from a liberty perspective might make a little bit of sense. And he said, the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. And I mean, any way you can resolve your issues. I mean, maybe subdue is a little strong here, but whatever the case may be, if we can avoid big bloody conflicts in the world, on the whole, that's a good thing. I think there's times, certainly there's some things that are worth fighting for. Some certain human rights and other things like that. But aside from that, I think, in most cases, we should be looking to avoid war, not get into them. What do you think, Leon?
Well, I look at this quote and, you really wonder when he said he used the word subdue, which is a word that really sounds like you are trying to do something to your enemy that you wouldn't normally think civilized people would do. Even though I do agree with you that at every turn in life it would be best if we can avoid bloody wars. But is this what he's saying, that it's the art of persuasion would be great if we can use that to resolve differences? Is he saying that? Or is he saying that maybe there are some deep psychological operations that we can run on our enemy and thus subdue our enemy without ever firing a bullet? Because there have been times in history, I think even here in the United States, I think there are people within the United States who have very nefarious intent and who are trying to subdue the general population, and they are not trying to shoot bullets at us, but they are certainly trying to manipulate our brain. So I don't know if a man who wrote a book called The Art of War saw and used the word subdue, if he really meant that we should try to resolve our differences without nefarious acts. I'm not sure what he's saying in his quote, quite frankly.
Yeah, it would be worth knowing, I guess, from back in 500 BC, was he more on the aggressor side or more on the defender side?
Exactly. That is the point. Yes, exactly.
I mean, either way, it'd be great to, to resolve conflicts without a lot of bloodshed. But, like I said, again, and by the way, I think I misspoke earlier when I said, one reason to fight is maybe defense of human rights. And I guess I wanted to clarify that just a little bit, because when I'm thinking of that, I'm thinking about liberty. I'm not thinking about free healthcare or free bus service or something else that a socialist might declare as a human right and is willing to kill for.
Yeah, because transgender rights is human rights too, according to the transgender. So I don't. So I'm glad you clarified that one, Jason. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, we always have to be a little bit careful when we start talking about human rights, because once that language starts coming out, the left will take that to mean anything that they particularly want at any given time as a human right. So, yeah, but I mean, I'm really focused on liberty. I mean, it's really, if you don't have your liberty, what do you have?
What do you have? Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So, anyways, but part of the reason I chose this quote is because, as we alluded to in the intro, Trump has attacked Venezuela. We saw a lot of skirmishes, a lot of, blowing up of, small, what some people were calling fishing boats coming out of Venezuela, and others were calling drug boats. they were kind of odd fishing boats that seemed to
very odd. Okay, I've never seen fishing boats traveling waters at that speed, quite frankly. But please,
yeah.
go ahead.
I don't know what they were going to catch at that speed. They caught something, yeah.
Yeah.
But it wasn't from the water.
Well, it wasn't from the water for sure,
Yeah, but so we saw all of these, what we assumed was Trump getting ready to use massive force on Venezuela, and instead, essentially, he reached in and snatched out the leader. In fact, let me go to our first story here, and here we have an AP story about how the U.S. captured Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro, and it may go down as one of these amazing military feats. So let me bring up a video to kind of catch everybody up to speed.
Venga por mí. Aquí lo espera Miraflores. No se tarde en llegar, cobarde.
U.S. Special Forces capture Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. Maduro's arrest comes months after his death to Trump.
So how did it all fall apart for the communist dictator?
The United States hit Venezuela with a large-scale strike early Saturday and said its president, Nicolas Maduro, had been captured and flown out of the country. Here's what to know. Multiple explosions and low-flying aircraft were seen in Caracas in the early hours of Saturday morning. Maduro's government immediately accused the US of an imperialist attack on civilian and military installations. US President Donald Trump posted on Truth Social that Maduro had been, along with his wife, captured and flown out of the country. He added that the operation was done in conjunction with US law enforcement. The apparent attack itself lasted less than 30 minutes. Trump said in his social media post that the strike was carried out successfully. It comes after the Trump administration has escalated pressure on Maduro, who has decried US military operations against alleged drug traffickers as a thinly veiled effort to oust him.
And so there you go. Maybe a historically efficient attack. I mean, I'm not sure if I can think of any operation that has ever gone that smoothly in a military attack. I don't know. What do you think, Leon?
Well, in terms of the efficiency of the attack, carrying that out, I think it was well done. I think the U.S. military must be praised for carrying it out as efficiently as they did. But beyond that, it raises all sort of questions about justifications and rationalizations and all sorts of things. Does the United States government has the authority to do what they did in Venezuela is an open question. I mean, maybe in the long run, it might be a good thing for the Venezuelan people. It might be. But I don't know. I don't know if we have crossed a line here in this. I mean, my concern really and truly is we are setting some very bad precedents here in the world. I mean, I believe in this country, and I believe in to some extent in its moral high ground, even though I can't say I've always lived up to that. But are we giving justifications to other people to do the same thing? I mean, right now Russia is in Ukraine, and they went into Ukraine, and they had all sorts of justifications for doing so. Where do we stand now? And are we now able to condemn Russia for going into Ukraine and trying to retake Ukraine, to make Ukraine now a part, or at least a portion of Ukraine is set to become a part of Russia now? So should we condemn that, given the fact that the United States have just went into a sovereign country and removed its leader? And now, I don't think much of Nicolas Maduro. He's a pretty bad dude, but it still doesn't. I'm not sure about the justification for our actions, even though maybe in the long run it might be beneficial to the Venezuelan people. The other thing is that China condemns Trump's actions, but China is going to make it sound like they're speaking from some sort of clean slate. They are right now trying to retake Taiwan, and who are we then to stop them or to condemn them? We have an agreement with Taiwan that we may have to enter war to stop China if they decide to retake Taiwan. But do we have any justification to stop China if this is the choice that they make? So the precedent that is being set here is seriously problematic. I mean, we have done this sort of thing before, because we did. I think it was probably in 1989 or 1990. I think it was 1989. We did go into Panama and got Manuel Noriega, brought him to the U.S. and tried him and put him in prison for a while. And I think he died someplace else. I don't remember where he died. But so when we do these things, even though they may work out, they may look good on the surface, I think Venezuela may benefit from this. I'm just uncomfortable somewhat with what justifications can we use? Can we still hold the moral high ground when we see people like Russia and China trying to do bad things in the world? It's a very thorny question, and diplomacy and international relationships are never nice and clean and smooth. I am not expecting that. But if we are going to hold any moral high ground here in this world, we have to be careful what actions we choose to take. And I don't know. I don't know. I think it might be good for the Venezuelan people, but I'm not sure it's good for our moral authority to speak in the world.
And I kind of, I want to echo that a little bit. I mean, we seem to be hearing, but especially a lot of conservatives, that it's almost like might makes right is what it seems to be that we're almost hearing. And don't get me wrong. I mean, Nicolas Maduro is probably one of the worst, most horrifying leaders in the world. He's just a communist thug, essentially.
Sure.
Who has destroyed the wealth of his country. And I mean, he didn't do it alone, in all fairness. Chavez started
Hugo Chavez was the one who really started Venezuela down the Socialist canal and ended up where Maduro took it.
Yeah. And we'll show a little bit of video, some past stuff that we've shown about how bad things had gotten in Venezuela, just so people can understand a little bit about how socialism really erodes at a country. But since we've kind of started to get into the motives of why we did this, I do have a clip of Trump talking about some of his motives. So this probably doesn't capture everything, but it does capture some of the key points. And so I want to play this video right now just to kind of get us on the same page about, what some of the potential rationales were for why we did this.
Not anymore. All the way back, it dated to the Monroe Doctrines. And the Monroe Doctrine is a big deal. But we've superseded it by a lot, by a real lot. They now call it the Donroe Document. I don't know. It's Monroe Doctrine.
So Trump appears to be trying to cite anywhere from drug smuggling as an act of war by Venezuela to the Monroe or Donroe Doctrine, I guess, that, to try to keep the influence of hostile adversaries of the United States out of South America. So it appears that there are a variety of rationales that he is pulling at. Let's listen to what he plans to do with the country, as they have not installed a leader yet, or at least not an outside leader. Let's hear a little bit more about his plans.
We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. So we don't want to be involved with having somebody else get in, and we have the same situation that we had for the last long period of years.
In your Fox and Friends interview, and then you also mentioned the vice president of Venezuela. Are you going to work with vice president of Venezuela, or how do you foresee the relationship
Well, I
going?
understand she was just sworn in, but she was, as you know, picked by Maduro. So Marco's working on that directly. He just had a conversation with her, and she's essentially willing to do what we think is necessary to make Venezuela great again. Very simple.
Is the U.S. aware of the location of opposition leader Machado, and have you been in contact with her?
No, we haven't. No, we haven't. Oh, I think it would be very tough for her to be the leader. She doesn't have the support within, or the respect within the country. She's a very nice woman, but she doesn't have the respect.
Mr. President, is it possible that the U.S.
That's pretty shocking to hear that Machado, who is a market-oriented person and actually won, it sounds like, a popular vote there, but Maduro stole the election from her, that Trump is not saying that she doesn't have the respect of the country. So, regardless of what his, and also too that he's backing Maduro's choice for his own vice president. So, there may be some strategy in this, but as far as cutting the legs out from under Machado, that seems extremely odd strategy. Let's hear some of his other thoughts.
We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country. And we are ready to stage a second and much larger attack if we need to do so. So we were prepared to do a second wave. This extremely successful operation should serve as warning to anyone who would threaten American sovereignty or endanger American lives. Very importantly, the embargo on all Venezuelan oil remains in full effect. The American armada remains poised in position, and the United States retains all military options until United States demands have been fully met and fully satisfied. All political and military figures in Venezuela should understand what happened to Maduro can happen to them.
So there you go. It's definitely feels like a bit of might makes right. Yeah. Did you have any thoughts on what Trump just said?
Well, I mean, I think Trump have always indicated that he wants to clean up, quote unquote, the Western Hemisphere, because this is, quote unquote, the US's realm of influence. But I don't know how far that permits us to go. This is the thing. And it is true that, I mean, I think we'll talk about this somewhat maybe later on, that we being the United States, have taken on this responsibility of being sort of the policeman of the world, shall we say, certainly of the Western Hemisphere. And we spend a lot of our tax dollars in protecting a lot of what goes on in this realm of influence, where here, whether it's in the Caribbean, whether it's in North America, wherever, we do spend a lot of money, a lot of taxpayers' dollars go into defense of all of these places. But I don't see that as a justification for removing leaders of nations. I mean, yes, Maduro was a crook. Maduro was a bad guy. Maduro was facilitating the shipping of drugs into the United States, and that drugs kill a lot of Americans. There's no doubt about that. But you know, if Maduro is helping drugs come here, it is because our fellow citizens are demanding those drugs. So you can't totally blame Maduro for the drug problem we have here in the United States. If Maduro is not supplying it, somebody else will. So we have a demand problem and a supply problem. Trump chose to go after the supply side by going after Maduro. The complexity of this problem is just somewhat overwhelming, because we really have to do something about the drug problem we have here in the United States. We are giving these people all sorts of reasons to take all sorts of risk to supply the drug market here in the United States. So the complexity of this just leaves us in somewhat of a bind of having the President of the United States justifying military actions in a sovereign country. It's you just have that difficulty in finding some clear line of reason on these things.
And this kind of begs the question, right? Because, and maybe we'll talk about this a little later when we get into some of the hypocrisy I know you wanted to bring up on some of these issues, but under the Biden administration, Maduro was indicted. So, I mean, he was indicted, I believe, for weapons and drug smuggling into the United States. So yeah. This was somebody that our legal system had declared was a criminal, who was a person who was outside of the country. Yes. And this really begs the question, at what border, I guess, does the reach of our laws end, right? I mean, to the point where we can reach into the equivalent of our Oval Office in another country and just pluck somebody out of it. Right?
Yeah, right.
Certainly and maybe we should be asking ourselves, would we be comfortable if that same thing could happen here? If we had an elected, I mean, personally, if Trump decides he wants to reach into the capital of California and pluck out Gavin Newsom, I won't have a problem with that.
Nobody's going to shed a tear, Jason. Nobody's going to shed a tear.
Yeah, I'll probably have a California flag out, just like those Venezuelan refugees.
we'll be celebrating in the streets if Donald Trump did that one.
Yeah, but that said, though, I mean, it really does beg the question when you're, there. What authority do we have with our laws? And that's what they were trying to claim initially, that this was a law enforcement action and not a.
Yes.
Because if you are claiming it's a war, then you potentially have to involve Congress. And, one of the observations here is, which is more like a war? Somebody sneaking drugs into our country that, like you said, Leon, that people here want, or they wouldn't be shipping them here, or literally blowing up boats coming out of another country and reaching in and grabbing their leader and firing ordnance into their country. One of those sounds a lot more like war than the other. Our government is classifying the drugs as war, and its own actions is just a police action.
It's kind of hard to call this law enforcement operation when you have your whole Southern Fleet masked outside the waters of Venezuela. You have military assets all over the place around Venezuela, and then you're going to call it a law enforcement operation. Come on, please give me a break on that BS. It's not a law enforcement. Okay, maybe there was some involvement of law enforcement, but it's not a law enforcement operation. This was clearly a military operation. It was done very well. The military should be praised for their actions. But my thing is, what are the justifications and rationales that we can use and still hold the moral high ground when we see our adversaries doing these sort of things in the various parts of the world? But it does raise, honestly, it does raise, I don't know if it's time for us to talk about this whole issue of hypocrisy involved in this thing. There are some.
Let's save that until after the break, because just for management of the flow, I don't want to have a video that's going to go right at the cut point here.
I got you.
Where we lose our public access.
Yes.
So, But there were some issues still that I wanted to touch upon from what Trump was saying there. And one was, I mean, certainly he is proud of and probably has great justification to be proud of the efficiency of the military strike. But that said, the euphoria that people are having when, if you look at the aftermath, we have left a communist still in charge there. Yes. And we have cut the legs out from underneath the market-oriented popular choice of the people there. And not to say that maybe there's some strategy there, right? I mean, maybe this is avoiding a power vacuum and the craziness that might cause a big problem down in that area too. But I did want to bring up a ghost of the past. And, that is the mission accomplished banner here that George W. Bush had when he made what was considered a rather miraculous, quick takeover of Iraq. And, everybody was saying, what was it supposed to be, like the third largest land army in the world at the time or something like that, or the fourth? And, we took them in, a matter of, what was it, a few weeks or something, I guess it was.
Yes.
And George W. Bush had a big mission accomplished banner on this aircraft carrier, and he flew in on it with a jumpsuit and, mission accomplished. And my God, that led to trillions of dollars being sucked out of our economy over the next decade of nation building there.
Well, yes.
and possibly is one of the greatest downfalls of our country as far as putting us behind the hole in debt and robbing our grandchildren of so much. So it's something we certainly want to be cognizant of when we feel euphoric that, hey, we just flexed our military muscle here in a pretty special way, but this isn't resolved yet.
You raise a very important point here. I know we're getting very close to our time, but it raises an important point about military operations and then the nation building leg of this thing.
Right. And by the way, let me just cut in there now, Leon. If you want to hear more about Leon's thoughts on nation building and you're watching on public access, you're going to have to go online to knuckleheadsofliberty.com to catch the rest of the discussion, because we're going to talk about this, some of the failings of socialism down there and other issues with this, and also to touch upon maybe the socialist now in New York who seems to want to emulate Venezuela in New York City. We're going to talk a little bit about him at the end. But anyways, that's in the second half of the show. Back to you, Leon.
Yeah, and this, I mean, the Iraq mission went really well, but then overall, I mean, of course, we had some ups and downs even on the military side of it. But then we got into this horrible nation building, which was essentially became a money hole, a sinkhole for our debt. We did the same thing in Afghanistan. We went into Afghanistan. We tried to get bin Laden. Well, we didn't get him. He got away because of some real crazy decisions that were made there. But he got away. And then we went into this long history of nation building in a country who have never known democracy, and they try to essentially impose democracy on these people, and it turned out to be quite a disaster at the end. That nation building is where I think we here in the United States have always gotten into trouble, because we always believe that if we could just export our democratic values and our free market values, if we could just export those things to any population anywhere in the world, everything will work out all right. But the truth of the matter is there are some entrenched things within nations, entrenched cultures. Maybe it's religious based, maybe it's just societal based. There are some entrenched things that are very difficult to overcome before we could even think about exporting democratic values or free market values into these places. And this is what I think our leaders have totally ignored. I know we have this situation in Venezuela, where Trump is talking about running Venezuela. Effectively, they're gonna do that. I mean, they may not have a political leader appointed by someone here in the United States, say appointed by Donald Trump or Marco Rubio or anything like that. But with the with the sanctions that they're putting on, with the demands and the sanctions that they're putting on, they're effectively going to run Venezuela. I am a little bit leery of that because nation building is part of the reason why our debt is becoming so crippling. And I don't want us to get into another situation like we did in Iraq or in Afghanistan. Sure, our military operations have gone quite well overall. I cannot knock those things. But
except for Biden's exit of Afghanistan.
Well, yeah, right. Which was
most embarrassing moments in the history of our country.
Embarrassing disaster. But in that Afghanistan thing, though, if we look at what happened, though, is all those years of nation building, even after we got into the war in Afghanistan, we went after bin Laden, which I think we should have. He got away. That became clear. But after that, we got into these 15, 20 years of nation building, which ended in a total disaster with that corpse of a president we had just suddenly get up one morning and decide it's time to exit. And 13, we lost Marines, we lost equipment. I think American assets came to about $83 billion that we left behind.
And not just left behind, put in the hands of people who wanted to attack us. Right?
Exactly. And I mean, it was a disaster. But I will contend that disaster that Biden allowed to happen, that Biden facilitated, came out of the fact that we got so deep into the nation building of Afghanistan, and not the military part of that. The military part of that, overall probably went pretty good, but the nation building part was nothing but a disaster. It left us a bunch of debt and the worst embarrassment of an exit of a nation, of us leaving a nation that you could ever think about. And of course, go ahead.
And I think it's important now to jump in, and when you talked about debt, it's the opportunity cost of these things, because we saw these things a mistake, but a lot of times when we see government mistakes, we don't really see the cost, right? I mean, we just hear it was bad, but what does that mean? And I mean, I think this chart of debt to GDP from our Congressional Budget Office really helps to illustrate the financial health of our country with respect to our productivity and the debt that we take on, and then the choices that we make. And I mean, I love this particular chart because it goes all the way back to the beginning of the last century, around the year 1900, and it shows the amount of debt that our country was taking on relative to as a percent of the gross domestic product that we have. And you can see these spikes occur with wars. World War I is right here. That's the first big spike. And then World War II, which is the first time we went over 100% of debt to GDP ratio, which is, most economists back in those days thought was really bad. Now you have these modern monetary theorists trying to explain how it's all great. You don't have to worry about it. But I think it's illustrative to see that these were the opportunity costs of major geopolitical issues of things like somebody trying to take over the world or something, right? Like, Hitler was, essentially what the thing was that we were confronting at this point. And, his trying to take over Europe and, maybe the world with his axis of evil, I guess you'd say. Yes. So, but if you look here at this chart, we kind of, after World War II, we become much more productive, really cutting down this debt to GDP ratio. And then we meander on with some, our war on poverty. You can see that didn't go so well. But we start to get things under control here, into the contract with America, those Clinton and Newt Gingrich. And then we come upon our nation building in Iraq. And oh my gosh, it becomes a wall upward, just like World War II. And what the heck did we get for it? We got like a whole lot of nothing. And then, you see in these years, you have issues like COVID and such that are drawing this big spike up as well. Just other bad decisions, and we're now suddenly at those levels from after World War II, and it doesn't look like we're just suddenly going to get more productive and cut down on our spending and reduce this debt cliff. And this is our government projecting that we're just heading off into the stratosphere here. So this is the cost, and when I say cost, that's why suddenly people wonder why maybe a house was affordable by your grandparents, and maybe it's not affordable by kids of today. As they come out with, and they have these massive college debts, and suddenly, things that were not very expensive. I mean, even things like silver and gold. Suddenly, I mean, just before the pandemic, those things, silver was under $20 an ounce, and gold was, I believe it was under $2,000 an ounce at the time, or right around there. And now gold is at $4,500, as we talked about in our last show, and silver is around $80 an ounce. So this is, that's just a few of the things. I mean, most things, if it's not technology intensive, tend to get massively more expensive when government tries to control them. So and takes away so much of our productivity to spend for its harebrained ideas out there. So,
well, the government always tries to pick winners and losers, and they never succeed, but they keep doing it. It's just like this. Looking at that graph and that upward trajectory started with this war on poverty in 1965 and Lyndon Johnson, and we have all these this. And notice it was a war, right? It was a war on poverty. And we as a different kind of nation building, Lyndon Johnson was trying to do. And look at the end result. All we have out of that trillions of dollars that we have spent is that poverty won, and our inner cities look like third world hellholes.
And by the way, these are the war on poverty numbers, and you can find these are right there on Wikipedia, and they're pulled from the U.S. Census Bureau. So you can, this is our government's numbers again, but you can see the number in millions of people in poverty and the percentage of people in poverty, and for the most part, the number of people in poverty has essentially flatlined if you just average this graph out, and maybe as a percentage it's just decreased a tiny bit. Right. And yet we've spent trillions, right?
Trillions of dollars, without a doubt.
Yeah, and I mean, they're going to things like Somali daycare centers in Minnesota. Right. So
we should talk about the innovations we are seeing in Minnesota with this Somali scandal that is going on. The fraud is unbelievable. But we really should talk about that one. That should be interesting. Yes, yeah.
Well, and you can see too, like we have a homelessness problem in California, and we spend billions, and they can't figure out where the money's going, and the number of homeless increases, right?
Yeah,
I mean, this is the government. It constantly finds ways to make everything worse. So much as they did in Venezuela, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, not our government necessarily, but
yeah, true. That's true.
More of Maduro.
Yes. Yeah. It's worthwhile mentioning that Gavin Newsom had a 10-year plan to solve the homeless problem. A 10-year plan, right? And this was like 25 years ago. So I always wonder what happened to his 10-year plan. This is the government at work.
Well, he had that when he was the mayor of San Francisco.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And of course, if anybody who's ever been to San Francisco knows homelessness has not gone away. It's only gotten worse in all that time. And since it seems to have followed Gavin Newsom out of the Bay Area and across the state, because as he has extended his footprint, so has homelessness. Oh, yeah, it's just terrible. But getting back to some of the other issues, you know, I mean, what do you think about the fact that, you know, here you have this Machado woman, and you know, the fact that we aren't taking sides with the more liberty-oriented person. We are backing the current regime. I mean, it does, you know, maybe this is a strategy to avoid a power vacuum, and he thinks he has the power just to threaten them and control them into making choices that will push them on the road toward liberty, hopefully. But I don't know. What do you think, Leon?
Well, you know, that statement Trump made, I really have a problem with. Okay, that woman won the last election, the election that Maduro stole. Okay, he lost the election and he refused to give her power.
I forgot to add the article. Here it is.
Yes. So I have a real problem with Trump's statement, because I honestly thought that this would have been the natural leader that they would have backed. I mean, surely maybe they might want a transition period to where they'll have some relatively free and fair elections, and this would have been the woman that they would have, the person that they would have chosen to hopefully to end up winning the election and leading the country. But then Trump came up with this shocking statement. But the problem to me is goes deeper than that. Yes, they took out Maduro, but all of his henchmen are still in place. As a matter of fact, this woman, and you pointed that out, this woman was the vice president under Maduro. That's the woman that is now in charge in Venezuela.
Yeah, and we say not Machado, that this is the woman we're talking about, but rather the vice president of Maduro is now in control by Trump's directive, essentially.
Yes, and thanks for that clarification. I was not talking about Machado at this point in time. But the point is, the vice president under Maduro is now in charge. All of the head of the military and the intelligence services and everything in Venezuela are still in charge. So I don't know what is gained by this military operation. Yes, granted, the military operation went very well, but what have been gained? I mean, maybe there's some, like you said, maybe there's some strategy here in place that we are not yet familiar with, and maybe it will become clear in the coming weeks and months. But right now, it is certainly not clear, because everybody that was serving under Maduro is still in place. I've not heard about a single person who say, well, they went on the run and they're trying to get away. They're in hiding, or I have not heard about a single person as yet who was in the Maduro government that have lost their job. So I don't know what is the strategy here. Maybe it's because my knowledge is quite limited and I don't fully understand, and I can accept that possibility. But I don't know. I don't know what Trump and Marco Rubio, what they have in mind for the future of Venezuela. I really don't know. And there's
one thing I do know that they have in mind is they're talking about, Trump has made a statement already, or at least Marco Rubio or Trump, I can't remember which, but certainly one of them has, saying that that Venezuela is going to give up 30 to 50 million barrels of oil it's a little bit confusing. And this is the problem with Trump, is everything he says is not precise. And it's, I mean, and let's be fair, right? I mean, if Biden had said a lot of the things Trump had said with the precision that Trump is saying it, we would have criticized Biden as well. So this isn't like, just attacking Trump or anything for the heck of it. This is a problem. I mean, if you are going to be very imprecise and you have your hand on the lever of power over not just this country that elected you, but other places too, this could, be very concerning. And, and we're talking about, if you talk about, say if it's 30 million barrels and oil is around $50 a barrel. So just the rough math of that is is well over $1 billion, right?
Yes.
Talking about transferring from Venezuela to his control. And he talks about how this will be used for the betterment of both the United States and Venezuela. What that means, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And what authority does he have to make that decision, right? I mean, it's one thing to say that, to argue maybe he has the police power authority because of the indictments to go after Maduro without the congressional approval. Maybe that flies. Maybe it doesn't. But the issue of saying that he has the authority to tell countries how much they're going to pay and that he's going to decide how to spend this can't be part of this can't be under the powers of our Constitution.
so they're not. You know, I mean, there are 2 points to be made about this, right? This issue about the oil. The optics are really bad with this. When we talk about we go into Venezuela, we remove Maduro, and the next thing you know, we're talking about the 50 million barrels of oil that we're going to get from Venezuela. It almost makes this look like this is all about oil, right? It makes it look like this, even though I'm sure there may be other reasons as to why Maduro should be removed and all that. The drug issue, I'm sure, is relevant here. They call them narco-terrorists now and all that. So all that may be pertinent to the discussion. But when you emphasize this massive amount of oil that the United States will receive from Venezuela, it looks like this thing's about oil. It sure makes it look like that, and that is not a good optics for us to have, because it looks like we are nothing but plunderers. You know, we are just there to scavenger hunt for what you can take from Venezuela and leave the country in shambles. I don't think we want that image being spread around the world about what we're trying to do here. Number one. Number two, there's a leftover issue that is not. Trump spoke about it a little bit, but it's somewhat germane to the discussion. During Hugo Chavez's administration, they nationalized all the oil assets in Venezuela. Now, the Venezuelan government had contracts with several American companies at the time, and these people were kicked out, and there was no compensation because as a result of the nationalization of the oil assets. Now, Trump we use the word, and Trump does say some things that are somewhat lunatic, but there is an issue here of, since these people, their assets were taken away without any compensation, do Venezuela owe those companies, those companies who, when the government broke the contracts, does Venezuela owe these people some compensation for breaking the contracts which they had? Now, if that is part of Trump's agenda, I could have no problem with that, because I believe in contracts, and I believe contracts must be fulfilled and satisfied by both parties. But Trump have not made that clear, that this is, even though he did mention one time, Venezuela stole the oil from us, or blah, 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 some lunatic sounding thing, right? But if that is part of the agenda to compensate the oil companies that lost quite a lot because of the nationalization of the oil assets, I think he better make that clear, because this image, this optics of this all being about oil is not a good one for the United States to have.
Not only that, too, but it does bring up an issue as well, because like you, I mean, I totally think contracts should be honored, but this does bring into question, though, how many countries or companies rather, are getting a free ride on the U.S. taxpayers by expecting potentially, U.S. police powers to reach into other countries, other risky countries that they do business with. Because ultimately a contract is only as good as your ability to enforce it, right? And if you're a company and you go into a country like Venezuela, and it seems to be, there seems to be a bunch of commies there and such. Now, sometimes maybe they went in before the commies took over, right?
Yes.
Chavez, but suppose they hadn't, right? Suppose that they just took a chance with an unstable regime. Should they be able to expect the American taxpayers to backstop their contract, to pay to send the force to enforce their contracts? Because that's the one issue I do have a little bit of an issue with. But I mean, I totally agree. They should, Venezuela committed a wrong when they broke that contract with those oil companies. I think Chevron was probably one of the big companies that they broke that with. But the issue is, I do think that companies need to build that into their own risk factor when they go into a country, not expect U.S. taxpayers to foot a military bill to support their business in other countries. So, and
I will have to say that is quite a valid point. I don't know if per se those oil companies or any company doing business in foreign lands, if they truly expect the military to the U.S. military or U.S. taxpayer to police their contracts, shall we say? Because I'm sure by now all of those oil companies have written those things off their books. But it does raise an issue, though, and I have to agree with you that it does raise an issue of whether the policing of contracts, the enforcement of contracts, becomes a burden of the U.S. taxpayers, and I don't think it should. To be honest, if a company is willing, a private company, underline the word private company is willing to take the risk, take the chance of investing in any foreign land, that should be a risk to them and their shareholders, not to the U.S. taxpayers. So this issue about Venezuela in particular and the oil companies lost during the nationalization by Hugo Chavez, well, in truth, you're right. You are right that this was a risk that they were willing to take, and this is how it turned out for them in this particular case. So we may have to chalk this up to risk that companies are willing to take to improve their bottom line, and if those risks turn out run against them, then so be it. So which having said that, though, it sort of leaves you in a little bit of a quandary as to what is Trump's goal then? If he's trying now to force Venezuela to honor the contracts that were broken, I mean, why that was not just a risk that the private company was willing to take? Because I'm sure if they were making extraordinary profits from the investments in Venezuela, I'm sure they were not going to share those profits with us beyond the taxes that they would normally pay. I'm sure.
In other words, privatize the profits, but socialize the risk.
Yes, exactly.
And then, which is kind of crony capitalism sort of thing.
Crony capitalism. Well, mercantilism, right? That's what that is, and I'm totally against that kind of stuff anyway. So, actually, I have to say that I didn't vote for Trump the very first time because of that, his mercantilist tendencies. So I cannot go back now and try to justify any action if it smacks of mercantilism.
Well, there's another risk I wanted to bring up too, real quick, before we get to how the people have felt about this. But the amount of unilateral statements that Trump has made in all of this, the idea that kind of skirting around needing Congress's approval by saying kind of what's the definition of a war, and is this a police action and all that? Well, let's listen to what he said in Air Force One when he's being interviewed by the press about other countries. And this is just a short snippet, but you'll get the point.
Well, it's very sick. Colombia is very sick, too, run by a sick man who likes making cocaine and selling it to the United States. And he's not going to be doing it very long, let me tell you.
What does that mean? He's not going to be doing it very long.
He's not doing it very long. He has cocaine mills and cocaine factories. He's not going to be doing it very long.
So there will be an operation by the U.S.
It sounds good to me.
And so this does bring up the question, does Trump have other targets in mind, right? Here's an article from Politico, and he clearly was stating that Colombia is potentially on the menu right there. But, there's been a lot of talk about, certainly there's a lot of developments happening in Iran right at the moment, and we have some involvement with some of that. You have him talking further in that particular interview about Cuba, not really saying that he's planning on invading, but he thinks they'll just collapse without Venezuela being there to ship them oil. Then he's talking, about narco states, and well, here you have Mexico.
Mexico, our southern neighbor.
Exactly. There's and of course he's been talking about Panama, and we had the precedent of Panama being hit by, who was it, Bush or
the first Bush ordered the Panama invasion.
And of all of the things that, and I'm not saying that that's necessarily justified, but the Panama Canal is of extreme strategic importance and economic importance. And so, and plus the United States had claims in the past, but like all bad government, they gave up those claims and then they wanted them back later on. So I don't know, but anyway, but Noriega, was accused of helping to funnel drugs into the United States, and so they went and picked him out, just like they did Maduro here. I don't know if it was quite as smooth as this one, but this and a much tinier nation as well.
It is. The Panama operation was an actual invasion. I mean, we had military boots on the ground for at least a month, I think, or maybe a couple of months. We had boots on the ground in Panama. We didn't have that here in Venezuela. When we took out Noriega, it was an actual invasion where we went down there and parachuters got in, military assets went into Panama and all that and stuff. It was a somewhat different operation than the Maduro Venezuela operation. But with Trump is trying to take hold of the Monroe Doctrine, which was right. This is our being the America, the U.S., the United States of America. This is our sphere of this realm of influence, if you want to call it that, and communist governments and socialist thug kind of guys are not welcome in this realm. So, and all these drug cartels who are ruling parts of countries are not welcome in our realm of influence. That is Trump's doctrine, or what is now here being called the Donroe versus the Monroe Doctrine.
Everything has to be branded for him.
Of course. He has to stamp his name on everything, like the Kennedy Center just became the Trump Kennedy Center.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if the what is it, the Venezuelan, the Bolivar or something like that. I'm not sure what their money unit is. If that starts having
the
Bolivar. Okay, yeah. If it starts having his face on it. Don't
be surprised, man. Don't be surprised. You might see just that.
Hey, there's nothing in the Constitution against that.
Exactly.
Hopefully, we haven't given him any ideas.
Yeah, who knows? Hell, man,
Suddenly he'll be telling us the bolivar is the greatest currency of all time. And it has his picture on it.
Yes, all these great and wonderful things is going to happen. But if I could finish this point here, I think honestly, northern Mexico will eventually become a target for Donald Trump, because northern Mexico, which borders us on the south, is essentially run by the cartels, drug cartels. There are about 5 or 6 drug cartels that is certainly in charge of northern Mexico, and the Mexican government, either through incompetence or share or corruption, they seem to be unable to handle that problem. And I think northern Mexico will become a target for Donald Trump. And I would not be surprised if one day soon we don't see military assets in northern Mexico. I mean, it will always be, I'm sure it's going to be under the guys, or under with the corporation, or with the approval, quote unquote, of the government of Mexico. But I think it's going to happen. I really think so, because I think Donald Trump believes it's his moral duty to clean up this hemisphere. And I think whether he's right or he's wrong, I think that's what he's going to do. So I would be surprised if other targets become in his sight, and I think northern Mexico is one of those targets.
Well, it's certainly the state of many of these countries with their corruption by the cartels is a direct result of the drug war and the consequences of having a drug war. And this is really kind of the step of doubling down on the drug war by just saying, hey, we're coming in with a bigger hammer, or maybe a turning point of saying, it doesn't look like we're turning, by the way, but it could be a turning point of saying, hey, maybe a drug war isn't the best way to deal with this. But anyways, I think that's pretty well talked about most of the issues about going in there, but we haven't really talked much about how the people feel about it. And so we did have a video here of showing the reactions of many people recently to some of this, and so let me show some of that so everybody can kind of get a frame of reference on this. So as you would imagine, we clearly don't have any agreement upon anything Trump does. People both against it and for it. Let's go see what the people appear to think about this.
The mainstream media coverage of the story is the lack of Venezuelan voices on shows. And every time they show anti-Maduro protesters, there's not a single Venezuelan in the crowds of protesters that they're showing. So I commend you for that, my friend. And then in terms of are almost all Venezuelans elated that we got this tyrant out, I would say 99.9%. The 1% is likely Maduro's inner circle, because quite frankly, this is a man that drove our country into the ground. This is a man that terrorized hundreds of thousands of people and led to one of the biggest humanitarian crises and refugee crises in the world. And
so let's go see what some Venezuelan refugees around the world are saying about this.
Venezuela.
So they seem pretty ecstatic in other countries. What about in the U.S.? Let's see some footage from, I believe it's in New York, where Maduro was arraigned.
Hands off Venezuela! Hands off Venezuela! No war with Venezuela! No war with Venezuela! Not a penny, not a dollar! Not a penny, not a dollar! We won't pay for U.S. slaughter! We won't pay for U.S. slaughter! Not a
So we're here for the arraignment to say, free Maduro, to say the U.S. has no right to be holding the president of Venezuela and his wife, Celia Flores.
So, of course, deranged socialists in the United States would like to see Maduro freed. Oddly, too, you notice that almost none of those people had accents. Like maybe they weren't from Venezuela. Maybe they were just lefty college students or rent-a-mobs. I mean, there are some reasons maybe to be upset with maybe how Trump might have approached this. But that said, the idea that anybody was asking for Maduro to be freed, I mean, that's just nuts. But there were actually Venezuelans there pushing back against these socialist protesters. Let's see some of that footage.
Make sure that the history of Venezuela is told by Venezuelans and not by paid activists that are standing up here to wash the face of a criminal dictator that is being brought to justice finally today.
Gente que no quieren que Venezuela salga adelante llegan a estos lugares y le paguen a esta persona, porque esta gente no es venezolana, no habla español, no conoce la realidad, ni siquiera sabe qué está pasando en el país. ¿Dónde estaba esta gente cuando en el 2017 nos mataron a los estudiantes, cuando en el 2014 nos mataron a los estudiantes? ¿Dónde está la gente cuando el año pasado se robaron las elecciones? Gente que no es venezolana, gente que seguramente está pagada, viene a pedir la libertad de un hombre que está siendo ahorita acusado de terrorismo.
Gloria, bravo pueblo, que ninguno lo son, la ley respetando, la virtud y honor. Abajo cadenas, abajo cadenas. Que viva Donald Trump, que viva Donald Trump, que viva Donald Trump.
And so there you have it. Except for New York socialists, everybody seems to be pretty happy that Maduro's finally behind bars. I think, but I know, Leon, something that you were, kind of peaked about was this idea of the hypocrisy of so many Democrats in all this, because so many of them, like we said, even. It was Biden administration, I believe, that indicted Maduro.
Yes.
And so, I mean, what was the point of the indictment if they never expected him to be arrested? Right? Was it just for show? But these are a list of things that they thought was hypocritical of Democrats. And here you see Senator Chuck Schumer leads the list here. So he said back then, when Trump wasn't in power, and the president brags about his Venezuela policy, so this is from 2/5/20. So I guess he would have been in power, but this was at the end of his first presidency when he didn't go into Venezuela. So he says, and the president brags about his Venezuela policy. Give us a break. He hasn't brought an end to the Maduro regime. The Maduro regime is more powerful today and more entrenched today than it was when the president began. And that was from 2/5/20. Now, today, or just a couple days ago, this is reckless. And the American people are just this morning in fear of what's going to happen here. I mean, is this hypocrisy or what? Leon, I don't know. Were there any particular favorites you had that you wanted
to?
Well,
I mean, almost any Democratic leader you could choose, and they'll certainly qualify as my favorite. But actually, Chuck Schumer was really the choice that I had in mind, because good old Chucky was all up in arms about doing something about Maduro, doing something about Hugo Chavez. He was all up in arms about doing something. And now that Trump have actually done something, now his tune have changed now. Now good old Chucky, now, just like you just read, it is so reckless. It's so reckless. So it's so unbelievable that the president of the United States can do this, blah, 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 blah. In Chuck Schumer's district, there are quite a lot of Venezuelans who are celebrating the removal of Maduro. I mean, doesn't he respect his constituents? He have no respect for them? That at least acknowledge that they are happy that this thing has happened? Now, whether you like it or not. I mean, Chuck Schumer is such a hypocrite, it's unbelievable. I mean, I'm reaching the point where I can't even stand to hear that man speak anymore. But I want to go back a little bit here, Jason, on the some of those people that you show who were against who wanted to Maduro free, You could always count on these white liberals, especially females, to always be looking out for people who kind of look like me in terms of our skin color, in terms of the hue of our skins. They're always trying to save us. I wish these people would just go home and shut the F up, quite frankly. I really do, okay? Because they serve no good purpose in this world. They really don't. Yeah. But having said that, I think Chuck Schumer takes a cake in hypocrisy on this whole issue. I mean, he was way out in front of wanting to get something done about the Venezuelan government, and now that it is done, he has a problem. But this is what the Trump derangement syndrome is doing to a lot of these Democrats. They are twisting their brains into pretzel and nothing.
Well, I did want to bring up real quick, just because you were talking about Chuck Schumer and his hypocrisy, I guess, or his lack of honesty, whatever. Here's some images just from Google. I remember this is the classic where he had a picture taken of himself barbecuing, and he's got cheese on rare burgers that he's cooking. Most people put the cheese on after it's cooking.
Yes. I remember this. Yes.
He put the cheese on the rare side, which means that it's just a photo op, right? I mean,
exactly.
Level of honesty, that he just. But this is something that his own staffers posted, for their, just as a humanizing photo, and then they realized that insane lunatic is cheese on a rare burger. So he didn't even know what he was doing, right? And it's just, trying to make him look like this is Chuck on the weekend. Oh, yeah.
They're good, boy. They're good. I mean, during the kind of related issue, I don't want to go off track here, but Kamala was going to cook jerk chicken for her wonderful husband, and she has an apron that obviously looked like it was just taken out of the package, because you could see all the marks, the folding marks on it and everything else. And there's Kamala holding up the chicken in her kitchen. I suppose it was her kitchen, holding up the chicken that she's going to cook for her beloved husband. God, give me a break.
Yeah. Or I think there was the one too where Elizabeth Warren tried to look like she was having a beer with her husband in the kitchen. Kind of an awkward photo op, I guess.
She could barely know how to put the beer bottle to her mouth, and then she's talking about, she's one of the people, one of the people. Jeez. These people are great. These people are really great.
Well, I tell you, this sort of brings us up to our knucklehead noise patrol. Now that we're talking about commies in our own country, and here in New York, no less. That brings us to our Mayor Mamdani for our knucklehead noise patrol, and he recently said that I guess he wanted to eliminate the frigidity of rugged individualism from New York and replace it with the warmth of collectivism. I mean, collectivism is what they're doing in Venezuela,
Exactly.
All of these hellholes around the world, and most of his bad ideas are coming from there. But let me show you first the video of him saying this, and maybe just a little bit of the comparison of what it really means, what he's saying.
Today begins a new era. We will replace the frigidity of rugged individualism with the warmth of collectivism.
Sadly, it's always the idea of socialism that sounds warm, but in reality, it almost always ends in cold, hard failure. And the reason is collectivism by force is ugly. It means taking from some by force to give to others, and not voluntary collectivism, which is just people getting together of their own accord to help one another, which is actually much closer to markets. If you really want to see how ugly this gets, you can look to current examples like Venezuela, but my favorite example is that of Tank Man from China. And so let's go to this little clip here that we have of that to show you rugged individualism versus the warmth of collectivism.
No one knows how many people have died in the crackdown. We may never know. Our own CBS News review of hospital figures indicates that at least 300 have died. The figure may be as high as 3,000 or more. Many were civilians who went into the street unarmed to challenge the military and were mowed down by machine gun fire or run over by tanks.
And of course, he's talking about the incident of Tiananmen Square in China, where the government, when students stood up for freedom, the government decided to roll over them with tanks. That's collectivism. Well, let's hear more of the story about the heroism of Tank Man.
It was noontime today in the center of Beijing when a man walked to the middle of the Avenue of Eternal Peace, which, as it happened, was already occupied. He walked to the middle and stood there. The man was alone. The tank was not. It wasn't just a single tank he stopped. There were 18 tanks and armored carriers in this convoy, and while he talked to the crew and ignored the gunfire, he stopped all of them. One man alone, of course, can't stop an army. Except for a moment, that's exactly what happened here. For 3 minutes in the middle of the day, an army was stopped by a man who stood still.
And the tragic, sad part of that story is nobody ever knew what happened to Tank Man after that happened. I advise you all to go check out Frontline, had a long segment on Tank Man, and I guess, nobody knows if the government got him, which likely in that society did, and very likely that guy isn't with us anymore. That is the warmth of collectivism.
A man who'd made up his mind, it seems, though why we just don't know. But when bystanders rushed in to save this stubborn soul, it wasn't easily done. He was pushed away at last, faceless in the crowd. Safe, we think, but in a city verging on calamity. What moves a man to just stand still? Is it courage or outrage or madness? We can't tell what was on his mind, and we can't forget what he did.
So, just a real story of heroic individual standing up against a government that is literally murdering its people on the street in those days.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know, Leon, if you had any thoughts. I was going to show just a little bit more of Venezuela's socialism, but if you had any thoughts on Tank Man before I jump to that, then feel free.
Well, Tank Man, of course, will live as a brave soul. I mean, it's unfortunate that we don't even know what have happened to him. I thought somewhere I read a story a long time ago that somebody had found out who he was, and he was still alive at the time. But I don't know if he still is. But it shows a sort of moral courage that few people have demonstrated in the face of this sort of violation of rights. That this man could stand up and stop 18 tanks on the streets just by him standing there. It's certainly a wonderful lesson in freedom and the need and the desire for liberty that we all possess, that was given to us by our Creator. And so I'm always my faith is always renewed in humankind when I see stories like that of Tank Man. But I want to go back to a little bit to the warmth of collectivism.
Well, Leon, before you do that, maybe I could show the video of it's a previous video it showed on another show, but it just shows an example of the collectivism that was happening in Venezuela and how Mamdani is trying to mimic that. And then that'd probably be a good tee off for you then to get into the warmth of socialism. So let me show that, and then if you just hold your thought for just a second there,
sure.
Let's go to Venezuela's warm socialism. Here we go.
Furious at Mamdani's proposal to open up a network of 5 city-owned grocery stores.
These stores will operate without a profit motive.
Mamdani says they would instead focus on affordability over profit and would leverage the lack of overhead costs like rent or property tax to pass on savings to shoppers.
Government-run grocery stores. Wow. If only we had an example where that had been tried before that we could check out. Wait a second, there's Venezuela. Let's go check that out. Of course, everywhere that we have socialism, we get lines, lots and lots of lines.
Cola porque no hay aceite, no hay jabón, no hay pollo, no hay nada prácticamente. Uno va a los supermercados y no hay nada.
course, the lines are due to shortages. CNN also did a piece that captured the frustrations as well. Let's take a look.
Even in the driving rain, Venezuelans started their day in search of food, expecting to see the usual grim queues that form at government stores. Not today. The only stores with affordable food are shut, closed for the National Workers' Holiday, the sign explains. It says sorry and thank you. People walked away empty-handed but full of dread, wondering where their next meal might come from. I asked Julian Perez what he needs.
All the basics. I have nothing at home. Sometimes I go hungry. Who can say that we, the people, aren't hungry right now?
And here's the thing. These people aren't allowed to come back tomorrow. Food is rationed here, doled out according to the last number on your government ID. Carlos Chirinos explains his turn is today. His number is 5.
Cinco. Hoy me toca a mí.
Cinco.
Hoy y el miércoles.
El miércoles. So he's saying that just today and Wednesday can he buy things, and because it's closed today, he's out of luck.
The CNN piece also covered the impacts of government-run health care, and I thought it was worth just sharing that here because it's all tied together and it's all a disaster.
Janet introduces us to her daughter Yazday, who explains the country is out of medicine too, and there's no line you can wait in for that.
Cancer waits for no one. I'm worried about my own health and the health of so many others who are going through this right now.
Yazday is holding unfilled prescriptions for chemo, and she says no doctor, no hospital can tell her when she'll get treatment.
It pains me to see Venezuela in the state that it's in right now, but what really makes my heart ache is the thought of not being here for my daughter tomorrow.
So Venezuela's disastrous experiments with socialism happened over 10 years ago, and it hasn't gotten any better since. But this is what's so sad, is that we have examples, and yet people keep coming back to this time after time after time. But I did want to share one other example, and that is when Boris Yeltsin traveled to this country after the fall of the Soviet Union. Yeltsin literally couldn't believe the wealth, the amount of variety that was there in the grocery stores in this country when he visited them. He literally thought at first he was seeing propaganda, but when he realized that this was literally the way Americans live, and then he, on his trip back to Moscow, he actually said, what have they done to our poor people? He said, I think we have committed a crime against our people by making their standard of living so incomparably lower than that of the Americans. And of course, that's what socialism ultimately delivers.
Wow. That's really a good story, Jason. You should develop that story in that video. Seriously.
Well,
you know,
it is pretty cold under collectivism.
I can't pronounce that word. Collectivism.
Collectivism and boy, I tell you,
yes.
Well, maybe you're short a few letters because it's collectivism and there's a shortage on.
Yeah, there's a shortage. There's barely a shortage. You know, but the thing that I wanted to say that I was going to say that I was so aching to say, I want somebody to tell Mayor Mamdani that warmth that you're talking about is a warm shit you feel in your ass that you could not wipe because you couldn't find toilet paper in Venezuela. I want somebody to tell this fool that is the warmth he's talking about. You can't even find toilet paper to wipe your ass, Mr. Mamdani. So wake up from your bullshit. Yeah. Okay, that's my speech.
And you know, I think when you see this, you understand why those people who are refugees from Venezuela are cheering when they see Maduro being marched in handcuffs, because that's what these socialist leaders do to their people, right? Exactly. And I mean, there's a lot of different stories. We didn't have time to dig into all of them, but I mean, there's a point where, you know, the people were essentially said to be on the Maduro diet because everybody was losing weight in Venezuela, not by choice. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
and they at one point were even, the government came up with a solution, which is they told everybody to raise rabbits to eat.
Yes.
Raise your own rabbits is what they said. And they put out, I think they even started to provide people with little baby rabbits to go start their own little rabbit farms. And it was a disaster, as all government programs are.
Well, socialism is very good at one thing, you know, and the government in general is very good at one thing. that is bringing misery to its people. There's a little bit of a personal story here that on a clear day, if you are standing in the southern part of Trinidad, on a clear day, you can see the mountains in Venezuela. It's not very far away. I think at some points it's as little as 9 miles. And because of Hugo Chavez and then Maduro, Trinidad now has about somewhere between, nobody knows the exact number, somewhere between 50 and 70,000 Venezuelans living in Trinidad because of this socialist nonsense in Venezuela. There are many times that Trinidadians used to leave Trinidad and fly to Venezuela just to shop, because Venezuela was, it was not a developed country, but it certainly was on its way in terms of being a developing country, and it was heading that way. Of course, its oil wealth was contributing to that. But the socialist, Hugo Chavez came, and the socialism came, and all of the collective nonsense came, and the Venezuelans started to flee, and they fled to the US, they fled to Chile, they fled to all nations around them, and one of those nations that they fled to was the land of my birth, Trinidad, and we still have Venezuelans living in Trinidad, who I am sure are celebrating the downfall of Maduro. But I don't know what's going to happen to those people who are still in place in Venezuela. I don't know. And that is something that we'll have to find out one day. Hopefully Donald Trump will tell us. I don't know.
And by the way, that's one thing I forgot to mention when we were showing all those people celebrating. Like you said, there were probably people celebrating in Trinidad. But the very people who are still under the thumb of Maduro aren't allowed to celebrate, because it's still a communist dictator there. And the very first thing they did was put everybody on lockdown after this happened.
Exactly.
We are, there may be, like I said, there may be a coherent strategy to this, but it sure on the face of it doesn't seem very pleasant to think that, hey, we've just had this big military victory, and yet there are so many people who aren't experiencing freedom there in Venezuela, and we're cutting the legs out from under the person who might actually be the candidate for freedom there, which is Machado. So
Machado, exactly.
Yeah. So
that is something that obviously we both don't understand. So hopefully we'll figure something out, and the Venezuelan people, and this should be our concern. Obviously, is what at the end of the day, what's going to happen to the Venezuelan people out of all of this? I really don't know. I really don't. There's so much uncertainty, so many balls up in the air. I don't want to sit around here and put my faith in one man. That one man being Donald Trump right now. I certainly don't want to do that. But I hope at the end of the day we could see a better living and better standard of living for the people of Venezuela. That is my hope and my prayer.
Yeah. This is, like you're saying, this is a story that's not going away anytime soon. This is the beginning of a story, not the end. This military strike.
Absolutely.
So
yes.
I'm sure we'll be talking about this in upcoming weeks and months as things start to play out there. And let's not completely have zero faith in Trump. I mean, after all, he managed a taking of Maduro that was, probably one of the more successful military moves in history. But that said, that doesn't necessarily mean we should put up a mission accomplished banner. We still
exactly
of our government. We've seen too many cases of government thinking they can manage not just other countries, but our country, and fail in that in so many different ways as well. So, everybody keep on your skeptical hats and keep Trump on the straight and narrow if you can.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I mean, yeah, I voted for Trump. I'm not ashamed of that, but I'm not going to sit around here and be rah, 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 and Trump. at every moment. No, I'm not into that. I want to know what is going to happen to Venezuela and what is going to happen to its people as a result of the removal of Maduro. Okay? I want to know what is going to happen. And I don't know right now. I don't.
Yeah. Well, that's about the end of our show. So if you've been listening to this, think about what you can do in your own community. I mean, there's people around the world who are having their liberty infringed upon, and it's probably happening in your own community where people are pushing, especially if you live in New York right now with this commie who just got elected mayor there. By the way, Trump put his arm around this guy in the White House just about a month ago. So let's so we've got a lot of skepticism going on here, but just keep in mind that there's people who are coming after your liberty everywhere. So think about what you can do in your own community and do what you can to help move the ball for liberty, because that's the only way we're going to keep it. So until next time, stay tuned and stay free.
Yes, indeed. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.